As we continue along this journey of understanding our true self, we need to be able to let go of the personal self. So in this video, I want to shed light on some of the most common ways that we see through this personal lens. And at the end of the video, I'm going to give you some of Yogananda's mind endurance techniques to create this state of neutrality. Before I begin, if at any point you find that this information has helped you, then please like, share, and subscribe so more people have access to this information. And lastly, it's so important that you know that I'm making these videos because I want to help you. So if you feel that what I'm saying is resonating with you, please reach out to me at the email provided in the description box below so that we can work together. It's not personal. The more you apply mindfulness into your daily life and watch your thinking and your emotions, you begin to realize how much of the time you're either thinking about the past or you're thinking about the potential future. So when we're doing this, what we're doing most of the time is we're dragging the past into the now, or we're dragging the future into the now. So we're rarely in the present moment. And when we're living in this state of either past or future, where are we? Ask yourself this very fundamental question. Where are you most of the time? Where are you living? Where are you placing what you are, which is your awareness? Where are you taking that awareness, and where are you focusing your awareness? When you're focusing it on the past in any way, you are dragging your past into the now. And so you're essentially repeating your past. And when we do this, we're not seeing reality as it is. What we're seeing is reality through the filter of a personal lens. And we can begin to notice how much of the time we're doing this when we watch our thoughts and when we watch our emotions. It's a little bit harder when things get really emotional because we're so identified typically most of the time with a very powerful emotion that it completely takes over our ability to step back and observe the emotion. It takes quite a bit of practice to get to that point. So it's important that we continually practice staying in the seat of witness consciousness. Now, I've mentioned this before in some of my other videos, and I call it the Witness Protection Program, but I'll say it here again. Nothing is going to protect you more than your awareness, than your ability to sit back and observe what's happening to you, because it gives you that distance, it gives you that space from what's happening, and that gives you the ability to see more clearly what's actually happening instead of being identified with what's happening. I remember when I first read some of the early lessons of A Course in Miracles, I was really blown away. I think it was the first or second lesson. And the lesson is pretty profound. You're supposed to sit and look at every single thing in your room and acknowledge that you don't know what anything is for. You really have no idea what anything that you're looking at actually is. This actually ties into something that Michael Singer talks about in his most recent book, Living Untethered, where he talks about just tree. And the story that Michael Singer talks about in his book has to do with a Zen student looking at a tree for the first time just as a tree, not as a tree that reminds him of the Buddha sitting under the tree or the tree that reminds him of swinging on it as he was a little kid, but a tree without even the label of being a tree, but just seeing it for what it is, as if he was seeing it for the first time, as if he was seeing it from the vantage point maybe of even being an alien. It was that neutral, it was that clear, it was that detached from any of his past. So that is essentially what the Course in Miracles is trying to teach us in those early lessons, is that the way that we're seeing the world is really skewed. It's always through this filter of our personal lens, of our past. Michael Singer also brings up the point that our psyche, which is just our thoughts and our emotions, are really the sum total of our past experiences. And this means that when we're identified with our personal self, we're seeing through the lens of the ego. We're seeing through the lens of our lower self, our very conditioned, limited, boxed-in self. Then the world is just reflecting back to us all of our wounds. It's reflecting back to us all of our limitations, because we're seeing the world in a limited way. We're seeing the world through the lens of the personal self. Everything is neutral. This is a really hard concept for so many of us to wrap our heads around. Because when something happens to us personally, it doesn't feel neutral at all. It feels tragic, it feels upsetting, or it feels ecstatic, it feels blissful. When something happens to us that we like, then it's completely skewed on the opposite end of the spectrum. So again, when we're seeing the world through a personal lens, everything feels personal because everything in life is about how it's affecting us personally. Now, when you begin to let go of seeing reality through a personal lens, you really see that everything just is. Everything is neutral. And you begin to realize that the value of things, the importance that we place on things, really has to do with our perspective of it. It really has to do with the importance that we decide to place on something. This is why all change is a change in perception. That's what realization is, right? We see something in a different way. And when we do, it completely changes our understanding of what is. So if we can at least begin to realize, at least start with a clean slate and realize that everything in life is in fact neutral. There's perfection in all that is. This is why I tell my clients that if you have a problem with something, what we need to do is we need to change the way you're seeing the problem. We need to look at this from a different vantage point. We need to understand that everything that's happening in your life is a call to action. And that call to action is a return to God. It's a return home. It's a return to being in a state of love. It's a return to that being your North Star. So ask yourself, what world are you living in? What lens, what filter have you decided to look through so that you're seeing life through that perspective? Because it's up to you. You get to choose. You get to decide what filter you want to put before your eyes. On a clear day, you can see forever. This used to be one of my favorite movies growing up. I don't know why. My mother and I would watch it all the time. It was with Barbra Streisand. And she was kind of this intuitive woman. They got into past lives and hypnotherapy. And I don't know, I found it fascinating as a child. But the title of that movie is really profound. On a clear day, I can see forever. And this is what happens when we see through the single eye of spirit, when we begin to see people just as they are. I think it's important that we talk about this idea of just tree in terms of people, because what we do when we look at a person, especially when we look at someone that we're close to, what we do is we tend to see them with all of their history. It's very interesting when you look at somebody as if you've never known them before. And I know this sounds like a really hard thing to do, but I promise you it's possible. Try to take a look at somebody that you're very close to and completely let go of the past history you've had with them, all of the things that you didn't like that they said to you or that you did like that they said to you. Just look at them with fresh eyes and look at them without any of those things attached to them. It's fascinating. And it is so beautiful because what you do when you do this is you give the other person a fresh start and you give the other person a clean slate to show up in a very different way than you might expect them to. And what this does is it essentially gives the person an incredible amount of space. You're giving them all of this freedom to be the eternal self that they are, the limitless self that they are, because you're not boxing them in to a concept of what you think they are. And it is extremely liberating for them and for you. And it is so healing for all of your relationships. And if you want to heal your relationships, this is a surefire way to do it. And what this does is it really allows for forgiveness to come rushing in because you're not tethering that person to all of the wrongs that they've done to you. What you're doing is you're cutting the cord. And when you cut the cord, it gives them the freedom to be who they are in a very new way. You're not only cutting them some slack, you're cutting yourself slack Because anytime that we tether ourselves to someone by not forgiving them, we are the ones that are also in bondage. We are the ones that are suffering because we're holding on to that resentment. So let go of that too. Attuning to divine will. I want to give you some tangible tools that you can use to begin to create more strength, more spiritual grit, if you will, in regards to this state of being neutral, this state of being able to see reality as it is, not through the personal lens. And I must credit all of these tools to Yogananda. And one of the things that he talks about is being anchored in the changeless. So it's this practice of being in the state of true self, of realizing our true nature. And Yogananda says that it's our volition that is our strongest tool, our ability to use our willpower. Michael Singer talks about this naturally because Yogananda is his guru. And Michael Singer mentions the use of willpower in a really interesting way, which is a little bit morbid, but I think it's important to recognize this because most people think that our strongest power or driver, motivator in life is survival. But Michael Singer says it's our willpower because people have the ability to commit suicide, which is the opposite of the will to survive. So we have this incredible tool, the use of our will, to even end our life if we want to. Now, obviously, I'm not advocating that we use our will in that way, but it is that powerful. And it's important to realize that we're always using our will. We're using our will to blink our eyes. We're using our will to speak. We're using our will to think. We're always using our will to do whatever it is that we're doing. So we can just as easily decide that we don't want to identify with our lower energies, with the personal self. You have the ability to use your will in whatever way that you desire, whatever way that you like. You absolutely have this ability. Decide who it is that you want to become. Decide what you want to identify with. You can identify with a limited version of yourself, or you can identify with the limitless, changeless, infinite version of you. The next tool that Yogananda speaks about is titiksha, which in Sanskrit means even-mindedness, endurance. And we apply this through practicing by the use of our willpower. So if you're in a negative situation or you're with someone that's negative and you're beginning to notice that you're getting triggered, you can practice the opposite feeling. You can just decide that you're going to stay positive no matter what's happening. So in the face of negativity, you decide it's not going to affect me. I'm going to stay positive. I am going to use my will to decide how I want to be in this moment. And we do this by not giving in to those unpleasant emotions. Remember, witness protection program. Get into that seat of witness consciousness and just watch, just observe. You don't have to identify with what you're feeling, with what you're thinking, with what this other person is doing or saying to you. You can just observe from the seat of witness consciousness. Now, Yogananda has spoken about how he's sat in icy cold water overnight meditating in the middle of winter just to build this endurance of mind. He's also sat in the hot sands of India for the duration of an entire evening meditating also to strengthen this endurance of mind, to realize that you can overcome anything by the use of your willpower. Now, obviously, I am not suggesting that you go ahead and sit in an ice bath or in hot coals for 8 hours at a time, but we can start with small things. Start with the low-hanging fruit. But the key here is that we endure, that we practice. Remember, this is resistance training. We're building that spiritual grit. We're building that endurance so that we can maintain an evenness of mind. So think of this as a marathon. This is not a sprint. Devote yourself to this path, and I promise that you will see the results. Okay, so the last thing that I want to touch on is japa, which is a form of yoga that practices the mantra of putting your awareness on God. So you can just say over and over and over again, God, 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 or I love you, God, I love you, God, I love you, God. I really like to do the second one because it really gets me into that heart-centered place. And it's so amazing what this does, because when we take our awareness, which is what we are, and we focus it on something that is beautiful, then it quickly raises our vibration. It raises us up out of those lower three energy centers, those survival centers of fight or flight, and that stress, that fear, that anxiety, that worry that we might be feeling. And it pulls us up to the higher energy centers. And we immediately begin to feel calm, centered, peaceful, loving, at ease. And it's a wonderful tool. So I can't stress enough, practice this. Just try it. Try it on for size. It doesn't have to be something that you do for the rest of your life, but just play with these things. It's like Michael Singer says at the end of almost all of his talks, work with these things. Work with yourself. Begin to work with some of these tools because they work. It's the science of yoga. It's a science. And it's science because it's tested. It works. It gets you there. And please share some of the things that you've practiced with me in the comments below. I would love to hear from you and see how you're actually using these in your day-to-day life. I love you all so much. Until next time, remember to let go. Let go of trying to be anything other than the truth of what you are.